Hello there, one and all, and welcome to episode 355 of Love at First Scent with me, Persolaise, as always, coming to you live from YouTube. And most of you will be aware from the video title that we have got an interview for you today. And as always, it's going to be an interesting one. I need to stop saying I've got a very special interview for you today because every single one is special, and so the word special ends up being a little bit meaningless. But we have genuinely got somebody very, very special in the virtual studio for you today, and it's going to be one of those situations where I'm not going to know where to start or what sort of question to ask them. So to start in the simplest possible way, my interview subject today is a gentleman called Paul Austin, who comes to us ostensibly today as one of the co-creators of the brand Lilanor that some of you may be aware of. I have talked about them already on this channel, and I'm sure we will spend a great deal of time talking about Lilanor and their perfumes and their scents and what sort of impact they've had already. But Paul Austin has done more than just be involved with Lilanor, and I'm going to give you the quickest sort of skim through the biog that was sent to me. So, and I genuinely don't know where to start, because it says here that at one point he was the global vice president of the fine fragrance division at Quest International, the company which was eventually bought up by Givaudan. And during his tenure at Quest, the company became renowned for creating iconic scents for a variety of brands, including Thierry Mugler, Serge Lutens, Tom Ford, Christian Dior, Narciso Rodriguez by Kilian, among others. And just before we went live in the little pre-chat, Paul told me that this gentleman called Serge Lutens kept coming into their offices thinking about starting a brand. So I think we're going to have to ask him about Uncle Serge, but that's just one thing. He is a guest lecturer on the topic of digital storytelling strategy at Columbia University. For the past 5 years, a guest lecturer at Parsons School of Design's MFA in fashion design on the subject of scent and synesthesia. He is at the moment the CEO of the Austin Advisory Group, which is described as an award-winning brand and content agency focused on the intersection of sense and storytelling. I think we're going to have to find out a little bit more about that. But there are so many other things here. He's been involved with the creation of a documentary called Nightbirds about circadian rhythms and wellness. In 2019, the Austin Advisory Group conceived and produced a project between the Parsons School of Design's MFA Textile Design program focused on the impact of technology, craft, and design on the future of all things, handmade rugs. And this was fascinating as well. Sparked off by a research trip to India, he then worked with a team of documentarians to create the Seed to Scent film series, about which I confess I know nothing, shot in agricultural communities and flower fields in India, Madagascar, Turkey, Jamaica, Spain, and France. So as I say, being co-creator of this brand is just the tip of the iceberg, which means that I need to stop rabbiting on and welcome to the studio from New York, Paul Austin. Thank you so much for joining us today, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, but I'm a little bit overwhelmed by that preamble because my life is entirely focused on this lovely new brand that we've created, Lilanor. So that's been my big focus for the last couple of years. But it's very nice to be on the show and so excited to have this chat with you today.
Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. And yes, obviously we will have to focus on Lilanor because there is so much to focus on. It is such a rich and textured and interesting brand. But we are going to have to ask you about it. So
that's okay. No, very happy to talk about all of that.
Lots and lots of people tuning in. We've got people saying hello from Los Angeles, hello from Dallas, Texas, hello from rainy Gothenburg. Regular viewers will know that, of course, we will put some questions from you to Paul as well, but please just sit tight on those questions for the moment because they may get lost in the stream. There will come a point where I will say, start firing your questions away, and then I will pick some to put to Paul. But I think we should start, and we should start with Lilanor. So I guess the sort of most obvious question, and perhaps the kind of most blunt question that I can put to you is, why did we need another perfume brand?
I think that is one of the greatest questions that we need to ask ourselves. And if I can just start by saying that the way it came to me is I had a long career in the fragrance world. As you mentioned, I worked at Quest for many years and at Givaudan, and started with some of the greats, had this great beginning, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about that. And when I went off to, I actually felt that I left Givaudan because I felt that the whole industry had become a machine. It was actually the question you just asked me is the question I was asking myself. Why do we need another fragrance? And I went off to India to do a sabbatical that was meant to be a month, but it ended up being almost 6 months. And I went there to study a few different things, and it wasn't really originally perfumery. But when I got to India, I was studying Ayurveda in Coimbatore in Tamil Nadu. And it was when I was walking along the streets of Coimbatore, I would get these smells on the streets, and these elegant ladies would have their jasmine garlands in their hair. And it was these smells that suddenly took me back to the perfume lab. And I suddenly realized that I was in a perfumer's Garden of Eden, that I'd gone all the way across the world to sort of do something totally different from perfumery, only to find that this is the part of the world where so many of these incredible scents come from. And it completely shifted my relationship with perfumery. And
was that your first trip to India? Had that been your first
It actually
time?
was. It was.
Okay.
And I went there to do an art-related research trip and to do this Ayurvedic element. I didn't go there with a perfumery lens on it at all. I wanted to take a bit of a shift. But I discovered in the shift that by chance, this is where, even though I'm a supposed perfume expert, it took me going there to realize just what an enormous contribution India plays to the role of perfumery, both historically, but also its modern contribution. How many prized ingredients we use have come from India that we use in niche perfumery and in fine fragrances. So those first weeks of being in Tamil Nadu and going to these flower markets and seeing these held flowers that we consider so precious, like jasmine sambac, I used in everyday rituals, was the beginning of a realization of this germ of this idea. And from there, it took several years and encounters to realize, why do we need another perfume? Is because, and with the founder and co-creator of Anita Lal, the brilliant Anita Lal, very well known in India for everything she's done to champion Indian culture, is to really elevate and reestablish India's role in the world of perfumery. So it's really more of a culture story. It's not about selling perfume bottles. It's really a much more layered cultural story, and that's what we're here to do. It's a very long arc of what we're planning and hoping to do. And so that's why we need another perfume. That's the short story. The long story, I'm sorry, to your introductory questions.
No. I was just going to say, actually, anybody who's sort of been to India, know anything about India, will know the Lal name, because it's not just Anita Lal, but the whole family is quite distinguished, aren't they? How did you meet her? How did that happen?
So over that last decade, after having that sabbatical, I decided not to go back to the world of fine fragrance houses. And I actually started this content agency because I started making these short films about these harvests in India. So I'm going to talk a lot, if you'll permit me, about one of the most important ingredients of Lilanor, which is, and I'd love your audience to know more about this company, one of the greatest parts of our story and one of the greatest parts of the Indian perfumery story, called Jasmine CE, also known as Jasmine Concretes. It's India's largest supplier of absolutes and essential oils to the fine fragrance industry, based in Tamil Nadu. And so when I was in the south of India, I met these guys, and I would spend every weekend going to different harvests and both in Tamil Nadu, but then ultimately all over the country. And I started making these short films because I thought it's extraordinary that, in an industry which was so known for beautiful imagery and marketing, the beauty and the truth that you see at the source, especially in India, is so breathtaking. I was trying to find a way to kind of document that and capture it. And so that became my means of making these films. And that my content agency was all about making what we call these source stories. And so I made many of these sorts of films, both in India, back here in New York and France for different brands, commissioned content. And along the way, and we did work for the Gem Palace of Jaipur, ABC Carpet and Home, Estee Lauder, SK2, many other brands. But along the way, I met the extraordinary and esteemed Anita Lal, who is known for many things, but perhaps best known for having started the luxury retailer, a sustainable retailer called Good Earth India. And you've spent a lot of time in India, and your wife spent a lot of time in India, and I would bet $1 or $2 that you will have passed through a Good Earth store and bought one of their beautiful cushions, rugs, mugs, and so she and I met, and we really bonded over the fact that she'd always wanted. She's such a huge lover of scent. She's a woman of great intellect and great capability, and she's a merchant and knows fashion, but her love is flowers and perfume, and she's always admired Indian ingredients, because as I don't know if your audience knows that India has, because of its biodiversity, it grows such a wide abundance of beautiful ingredients, and so she loves Indian ingredients, but she's always loved French perfumery. And so we bonded over this idea that India's story has always been one of a ghostwriter in the world of niche perfumery and fine fragrances, and that's where our dialogue began, and that's where it blossomed from that moment.
This may be an impossible question, but can you remember the first thing you smelt when you arrived in India? Can you remember the first?
Absolutely. It was the first thing that I was conscious of smelling. I mean, actually, I should say it in two ways. It is and I'm sure, I don't want to presume, but perhaps it was the same thing for you when you get off the plane in India. There is this completely remarkable scent of the air. That mixed with jet fuel, with humid air, it's just I love it. I still find it very pristine every time I land in India. But from a perfumistic point of view, it really was that the jasmine garlands of these very elegant southern Indian ladies walking down the streets of Tamil Nadu with their mali, the malipu, the jasmine sambac garlands in their hair, and the sillage of that I would often get in the trail of them and follow them without seeming like a lurker. But I would just so enjoy that smell that I knew so well from my little amber bottle from my lab, but I had never really enjoyed it from being in situ.
So what was the moment when things started becoming a little bit more concrete, a bit more tangible? When did the conversation with Anita Lal, the encounter with Anita Lal, really start coming to be Lilanor?
Well, it started several years ago, and as I said, Anita had always wanted to do a perfume out of India, and so we started exploring different options, thinking about when and how could we do it, where should we do it, what should it be, what should be the name of it. Naming was its own interesting little thing. I'm sure some of your audiences have got their own brands. Naming is a really interesting thing. We had another name, but we couldn't get the trademark. And then actually there was a well-known friend of Anita's, I think she said it, so I'll say it, is Imran Ahmed from BOF. I think she was with him at some moment, and with Bharti Kaur, the artist, they're all together and they're riffing and brainstorming, and it was a bit of Lila and a bit of Nur, because for those who don't know, the word Lila comes from the Sanskrit, and it's got a very lyrical idea to the Indian ear, and it sort of means the effortless joy of creation, cosmic play. It's very expansive as an idea. And Nur comes from, as I'm sure you know, the Arabic or the Persian, which means divine light. And I think for Anita, it was a very important to nod to India's syncretic culture, the fact that it's been, as a culture, it's been amalgamating and morphing unbroken for thousands of years. And it's sort of the longest living culture, if you like, that's been unbroken. So I think that was an important nod for her. And that was with a little bit of agency from Imran and Bharti and a couple of other people when we didn't have our other name. And I think it's beautiful and it works really well.
So that's great, and I would love to talk a little bit more about the design touches as well, because we do love talking about design on this channel.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Here's a question for you. So everything so far has been India, championing India, beautiful materials from India, which is all true.
Yeah.
But you go to perfumers based in France to do the perfumes.
How does
that?
So first of all, I'd like to go back to your question, why does the world need another perfume?
Okay.
And why does the world need another perfume, which is ingredients from X country and perfumers from France, which is, in my opinion, a little bit of a cliche. So we did not, and I personally did not want to do anything that was easy or was done by four. I'd been at that rodeo way too many times in my previous life. And certainly, I think Anita and I shared that vision that we wanted to do something deeply purposeful and no shortcuts. And so going back to, and I'm going to keep coming back to my friends, Jasmine CE from Tamil Nadu. The reason that we worked with the perfumery team we did, and having had a long career in the world of fine fragrances, I've got lots of great friends at all the fragrance houses. But the reason we work with Firmenich is because Jasmine CE has a really exciting joint venture with Firmenich Naturals Innovation Team. Okay. So our brand is actually built on this very intertwined two-way innovation that's happening between the innovation team in Firmenich in grass and the agricultural extraction level in Tamil Nadu with the Jasmine CE team. So it's resulting in new extraction, new, and I can talk about this in more detail, but just top line, new ingredients that are being brought onto the palette, new extractions, captives, and really looking for helping the Indian culture of floriculture, as well as bringing innovation. So it's very exciting, that work. And so our brand is sort of built on the chassis of that two-way innovation between.
Right.
And so because of that, that's why we work with Firmenich. And then from there, we laddered out to which perfumers and why, and I can happily talk about that too. But that first point is quite important for me.
No, and that makes complete sense. But was there ever a conversation about whether it could be done entirely in India?
Oh, that is absolutely. So I think there are a few things. One is we have a very long view, and this is the first iteration of many iterations that we are planning that involve doing much more in India. So this is, and I think this first iteration was about. I think if you were to look at it as a reference, going back to Anita's view on her love of Indian ingredients and her admiration and respect for French perfumery, and this commissioning these great perfumers through this lens of this joint venture to do something exceptional. But in the future, we have many different permutations and variations of that. And our goal ultimately is to raise Indian expertise or shine the light on that in its own way in every form you could possibly imagine.
Oh, fascinating. Well, good. Yeah, we'll hope to see the fruits of that in future.
Yeah.
Now, we should do some smelling because
lots that's the fun part.
We should do some smelling. I would like to start, if I may, with one that I mean this in the nicest possible way, but maybe you will disagree with me. With the one that to me seems like a little bit of an outlier in the range. Maybe it's because its name doesn't very overtly reference a material. Maybe it's because it's got a single word name. But
Incarnation.
Incarnation. But it's also the one that immediately kind of struck me. So I think I'm right in saying that this was composed by Olivier Cresp.
Yes.
There we go. There's the bottle of Incarnation. Tell us how this one came about, and is it a little bit of an outlier? Or...
It's completely an outlier, hence the coloration, hence the name, everything else. I'm just going to smell it with you.
Right, I've sprayed some as well. So go on, tell us about Incarnation, because I'm still quite sort of.
Okay. So all of the other we have a collection of 7 eau de parfums. It's lovely, isn't it? It's fun for me to smell it with you. By the way, this is great, and it's the first time I've ever done a
live smelling.
Live smelling. I mean, I've done it, but it's really fun to do it like this. And I'm loving your colorations. I think it smells even better by looking at your color palette. So this the collection, there are 7 eau de parfums, 7 fragrances. The other 6 are all based on the idea of taking an iconic ingredient and giving perfumers carte blanche and really focusing the story around that ingredient. Incarnation was a completely different creative conceit, and this is really Anita's vision come to life, because it's and I think that first of all, I met Olivier Cresp when I first started my career as a kid in Paris, and I was a trainee at Quest. I had come my first ever. I didn't speak a word of French, knew nothing about French perfumery, and I went to work for Yves de Charisse, the man who is singularly responsible for my lifelong passion for this category, and he's from the many generations ago founding family of Grasse. And in the team, Olivier was in the team for us at Quest, Chris Sheldrake, Maurice Roucel, they're all my immediate colleagues. Even Pierre Bourdon came along there too, and several others. And so that's when I first met him, Olivier. So we've sort of kept in touch over the many years. And so I'd asked him if he would make a perfume for us on this. And his idea was to sort of, he talks about the love affair between India and France, this vis-a-vis, how the French and the India share both a love of scent and sensuality. And this is really a memory for him, a memory of, for me, it's quite a nostalgic scent. It's sort of his memories of going to these grand Rajasthani palaces and seeing these sort of women dressed in these beautiful, colorful saris and beautiful jewels. And they would often be wearing these grand French perfumes, but it'd be mixed with, maybe the gujara or the jasmine in the hair and wafts of temple incense. And so this is sort of the memories of those sort of grand Rajasthani evenings. So it's got this grandeur, this nostalgia, and this distinctly glamorous and gorgeous Indian quality to it. So it really elicits such a sense of place for a lot of people.
And would it be fair to say almost a kind of vintage quality to it as well?
Oh, definitely. We purposely created that sense of, some people, there are many people react to it in different ways. Some people someone said to us the other day, oh, this smells like money honey. Like that's what we get quite a lot.
Okay.
We also get, it's like 40s Hollywood glamour. We also get some people say, oh my God, this is like kissing my mum coming in with her pearls and chiffon dress. Others get, so it's meant to evoke a little bit of that nostalgia, but in a very, dressed up modern way, and for it to feel Indian too. That's the brilliance of Olivier's work. He really understood how to weave in these elements and bring something new to the category, because each time we wanted to add an authentic Indian story, but a new story to the canon of perfumery as well.
And how does the sort of creative dynamic work? Like, do the perfumers liaise with you, or with both you and Anita, or
it was very dynamic with both of us, and so it was really a very active and dynamic process, and so in a couple of cases, Anita and I would meet in Paris, or I led a lot of the development from here. So it really was a real team effort, and very easy and connected effort. And I think that for Anita, it was really, it would have to have her, these have to be very much a sense of India, and they can't be an interpretation from someone who's not Indian. So it must be a very clear representation of her vision too. Absolutely, most important.
And did this one have to go through quite a few sort of mods and change?
Oh my God! Oh my God! Well, I forget how many, but I'm reminded, as you talk about mods, I don't know why this comes back to me. I'm reminded of, and I might have forgotten the exact number, but I'm reminded of when I started my career and we worked on this fragrance, and Olivia worked on this fragrance, it would soon become known as Angel by Thierry Mugler. That was in the high 800s of modifications before it was done. Don't think that was in the hundreds, but it was many, many modifications. And for Anita, the other thing that was really important is the idea that the range, is there. We've got a variation of color on the bottles, of the labels. But in India, there's this idea you to have something that's playful and it looks different from everything else, to sort of turn everything else on its head. And that was also why the coloration is different. It's got the Rani pink, the India pink, to sort of signal that it's very different in every way.
No, that's fascinating, and I love that there was sort of consciously a retro feel to it.
Definitely.
No, so thank you for that. Now, what I will say to folks who may have just tuned in is that you're watching episode 355 of Love at First Scent, and today we are very, very, very fortunate to have in the interview hot seat Paul Austin, co-creator of Lilanor. So, if you would like to start putting some questions to Paul, please feel free to post them in the chat now. And if you're able to say where it is that you're watching from, it's always nice to know. But I'll carry on putting a few questions to you at the moment, Paul. Now, we were talking about design. Talk us through some of the decisions that led to, you know, the product, as it were, looking like this. I'm intrigued by the cap. I'm intrigued by the, you know, the etching design on the cap. And also, because I'm a little bit of a typeface font geek, you know, this business of almost like making a capital N for, I mean, I know that it indicates that it's another word, that it's two words coming together, but talk us through some of those sort of processes.
So I think that, you know, the design process is a really exciting one. And what's also been exciting is that there's never been, as far as I'm aware, and if there is someone else, there were being very few, let's put it this way, overtly Indian fragrances that have been launched internationally. And so I think that when you think about the design language of India, it's such a rich pool from which to draw from. And so we went through many different iterations of bottle designs, and, you know, thinking about texture and layers and colors, and ultimately we decided to land on a bottle shape first of all. That was really about maybe for want of a better word, we talked about this, the absolute focus is on the almost the French side, the iconic quality of the bottle shape, right? And the jewel-like quality of that, the colors. So these sort of like the, you know, and I don't know if you've got the Atars with you, but these sort of almost these spinel-like colors, these, you know, these beautiful turquoise colors. So it's really about these jewels, and even the kind of the facets of here, it's about these jewel-like tones. You know, so that was very important. Now the cap has what we call a jal design, and many of you will know what a jal design, but this is something that is so iconic, and you see it in many different Mughal design in architecture. For example, in the Taj Mahal, and I'm sure you've been there. When you walk in, you see this sort of motif in many different parts of Mughal architecture. So it was really about wanting to make nods to Indian design without making it too desi or too. And we went through many iterations. And then the colors of the labels, as you can see, there's a variation in all of them. That is a nod also to actually a lot of it goes back to almost to some sort of Persian references, because a lot of Indian perfume culture comes from the Paradise Gardens of Iran too, and those lovely feroza, these lovely turquoises of these canals that you'll have water going through those paradise gardens, and that's like variations of those turquoises. So it's almost a nod to the garden, to the Chaharbagh, the Mughal garden. So these are some of the references, and even the hand drawn frame on the label. That's a nod to Indian painting. So there are lots of little subtle nods. We didn't want to browbeat people with our codes, but everything is deeply intentional.
It's always difficult, isn't it? Or maybe you found that it wasn't difficult, but it's difficult to find a bottle that functions as truly unisex. Because I find that bottles that are sold as unisex will either sort of lean towards what we could consider masculine design codes or feminine design codes. Was that a consideration? Because of course the perfumes are sold as unisex, aren't they?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And you know, and just talking about that. So in terms of the scents, and I'm conscious that we're only sold in 2 doors at the moment, which is the beginning of our journey. We're sold at Harrods and Bergdorf Goodman. So I'm conscious that not that many people yet have had a chance to experience them, but there are 3 or 4 potentially somewhat more overtly floral scents, and 3 that are, you know, more spicy and woody ones. And the ones that are floral, There's one which is the tuberose, the Rudgy Nocturne, that I probably would think is more traditionally in the realm of what might be considered feminine. But so many men I know, and particularly Indian men, love that scent and wear that scent. So I'm pretty happy that we didn't go down any of those obvious roads of femininity or masculinity. And indeed, they're all the things that I really don't ever want to, go down those roads. We're not here to do that stuff. We're just here to present the juice. That's the most important thing, that we're most proud of. The rest is just about presentation. But it's really, we want everyone to focus on the stories, the scents. That is what we're here to tell people about, is India and the stories of its scent, by bringing it to life through this great perfumery expertise.
Have you had any feedback yet from the retailers about sort of things to bear in mind? Because I know Harrods and Bergdorf's always have a view as to what works.
Oh my, yeah, oh yes, yeah, and it's been, it's interesting. Again, I'm sure a lot of people who are watching have had experiences like that. You never know which ones will do well, which ones won't. Your babies are the ones that maybe fare least well, and the ones you don't expect fare most well. So we've definitely had lots of great feedback from both, also about sizes and frequency of launch and size of the collection, and of course you always have to filter that information, because we have a story that we want to tell, and we are committed to telling that story in a very authentic way. And so it's just about how do you thread the needle, and so far so good. And the more people that find us and talk about us, and the better, and hopefully that will make our business. But we're not deviating from our vision, and hopefully it will work well with our retail partners, who we're very, very happy to be associated with.
It's interesting you mentioned frequency of launches. Is there pressure on you to, because I know that the shops seem to want new all the time.
Yeah, and look, I understand that, because it is about, but I think one of our biggest challenges, actually, it's really something we talk a lot about internally, is India is not yet well known for its perfumery world. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm a supposed perfume expert, and I didn't know about the depth and breadth of India's modern contribution to perfumery, let alone its ancient story, until I started spending time there. So it requires education. So it means that we have to be in places where we have the opportunity to explain our story without over-explaining it either. And I think that is the first and foremost, the number one thing, is where's the right place to have, I'm not saying a 20 minutes conversation with someone necessarily. People don't necessarily want that. But equally, I don't think we should be in the place where it's just about putting new stuff on that's sort of pretty and shiny and hope that will work. We are going to be very purposeful about where we will be, where we should be, so we have a chance to explain our story. And hopefully it will be a new story. And I think your audience is one that I really, really want to know about us, because your audience cares about innovation. Your audience cares about stuff that is different from everything else. And that's what we've tried really hard to do. Whether or not we've achieved it, I'll let everyone else be the judge. But that's been our intention, and we'll see if it means something to people.
Thank you. So putting you on the spot, are you able to reveal roughly when we might get the next one, or is that?
As they say in India, soon come, soon come.
That sounds like a no. Okay. Let's do a little bit more smelling. Which is the one, because I've got the discovery set here, so I've got vials of all of them. Which is the one that tends to be like a kind of instant love for people who smell the range for the?
Let's go to the, I think the Agar épicé is a
okay. So going straight for the oud. Okay.
I mean, we can stop along the way if you like.
No. I've got the Agar. I've got the Agar.
Okay.
Remind us who made this one, because I know that some are Fabrice Pellegrin, some are.
This one is, so there are 4 perfumers who have contributed their gorgeous work. And some of the prerequisites for the perfumers were passion for India, passion for natural ingredients, had to be connected to this naturals innovation team in Grasse. So, there was a lot of elements of, and then just had to be, and so it was so much fun having this project, because with India, there's always such good vibes and good spirit. And so was really a wonderful creative journey.
Before we get
to
Fabrice, I'm just going to bring this comment up from Claire, who says, this crowd would want a 20-minute conversation, and I think she's right. We this is the lot that would want the 20-minute conversation. But anyway, so I've sprayed the spicy Agar. Talk us through this one.
Yeah. So look,
very dry, isn't it?
This is the one that man, woman, and child, particularly in the cooler months, seems to. And this was a complete shock to me. I thought this would be a much more controversial scent than it actually is in the end. So why this scent? We're trying to tell this is 7 chapters in a very long story of Indian perfumery. This story is about spicy oud, sort of agar wood. Now, why? Most people have absolutely no idea what oud is. They have absolutely no idea what tree it comes from. And if they do, they have absolutely no idea. Well, they probably won't know it's an Aquilaria tree, and they certainly won't know that Assam in East India has an abundance of it. So each time we're trying to educate people about the Indian story of ingredients. So here, the idea was quite about trying to capture that sense of oud meets creamy sandalwood with this ginger and this was leathery accord, guaiac, cypriol quality. So it's
the ginger is very marked, isn't it? It's
yes. So as I saw someone write today on a comment somewhere, it's almost like there's a chai latte quality in it, which was not intentional, and I thought, that's not a bad comment, but it's a really warm, warm, rich, sensual, woody, creamy, dark, and delicious scent. Not gourmand in that. I mean, by the way, I refused any of those tricks of some methyl maltol, dihydromercenol, any of those tricks, not verboten. So it's not gourmand in that classic sort of way, but it is very, and the sandalwood for me brings also the great sense of Indianness to it. I really love this scent, and it's the sort of scent that people say, like, I wear it if I'm going out in the evening, and it's a crazy compliments generator, by the way, which is not the only reason I wear it, but it is something that when I went to the Fragrance Foundation Awards, it's the sort of one I would wear with my dinner jacket. But then there are women I know who wear it, and they say it feels like they're wrapped in cashmere. So it means a lot of things to a lot of people. This is a very, it evokes so many different reactions. It's a very powerful scent.
What's interesting as well is that I agree with all of your descriptions of it, but also it's interesting considering what it isn't. It isn't especially sort of fecal in the way that oud can be, or medicinal, or particularly animalic. So are those sorts of elements that you consciously kind of wanted to steer away from?
No. So we wanted to have a sweeter, more sensual quality, less of that sort of overtly what people would call a Middle Eastern oudy type of approach. And that's why we wanted to focus on the ginger, the sandalwood, the spicy, the woodiness of it, rather than, and bring it, as I said, each time we're trying to bring a different story to the canon of perfumery rather than going down those roads.
No, thank you. Now, we also, the clock is always ticking here. We've mentioned the eau de parfum, and hopefully we'll do a little bit more smelling, but we must talk about these as well, because you haven't just got the eau de parfum. You've also got 3 releases, which you have called Atar Absolu. And I think I'm right in saying, well, there's a jasmine, and I've got the tuberose here as well, but there's also a rose.
Yes, that's right.
So, at what stage of the creation of the brand did somebody, Anita, think we also want to have some Atars?
So that was absolutely fundamental from the get-go. And so can I, as you've got such a learned audience, can I try to explain what I think an Indian Atar is, which is different from what other people might. So an Indian Atar, or not as known as an Itar, generally is a distillation of sandalwood done in field into a receiver in a very arcane process, into which at a later date other biomass, flowers, herbs, spices, combinations, do a kind of co-distillation over time, and that goes into the sandalwood essential oil in the receiver, and it's that effectively an infusion process. Why sandalwood? Sandalwood acts to sort of acts to retain the more volatile elements, because Atars are alcohol-free. Comes from a Persian Indian perfumery culture without alcohol, and these Atars, these old-fashioned Atars, always used Indian sandalwood, and they'll be used in small amounts, a bit of cotton wool put behind the creek of the neck, of the ear, in other containers. But today, sandalwood is unattainable in India because of all the reasons you probably know and your audience knows. And so for Anita, that was also really important that Lilanor becomes a place for us to explore Indian perfumery rituals, and not just European perfumery rituals like eau de parfums, which are alcohol-based scents, yes, using Indian-focused ingredient stories. And so this is our way of reimagining the Indian Atar, and we did that by working with the head of R&D at Firmenich innovations team in Grasse to take these absolutes of Indian tuberose, Indian rose, Indian jasmine, and macerating them through a proprietary infusion process we developed together with this sort of sandalwood complex. It's a santalum album, an Indian sandalwood, but not grown in India because of all the reasons we know. And there's this infusion process that infuses it together over more than 100 days into this quite beautiful, luxurious base. So the way an Atar is used, we use that on, and I don't know if I'm speaking too quickly on this. If I am, please.
No, it's fine.
Pause. But the way that we use an Atar, we suggest using an Atar in this traditional way, modern way, is like as a private perfume. You put it on your pulse points, on your shoulder, maybe a little bit in the décolletage. It's gorgeous. It's only 2 or 3 ingredients of the highest quality, and you'll be the judge of it. But it's insanely gorgeous for fragrance lovers. And then
no, go on. You sorry. Finish
and so no, and simply that's how they're just gorgeous on their own to wear for you with your lover. It's a very intimate, lovely, gorgeous scent. But where they become alive is when you layer them. The oil is a base. So, for example, I don't know which one you just put on yourself.
The jasmine. Okay,
that's quite a strong one, right? But if you put the jasmine, actually goes really well with the Incarnation. So if you spray the Incarnation now on top of that, that is divine, and you will now smell that till tomorrow morning.
Am I going to come back to life as a Brahmin now?
You will absolutely be reincarnated. Right. As a Brahmin, I can't promise you that, but there will be some incarnation. But that, and there's all sorts of wonderful, and that, by the way, the rose Atar goes beautifully with the Agar épicé. There's many of them work so well together. So it's those combinations that we're very excited about. The tuberose Atar with the Rajni Nocturne tuberose eau de parfum is superb. So it's really about trying to bring the jewels of the Indian landscape, these beautiful flora, to life in the most vivid, glorious, exquisite way.
So just a slightly technical question, and we don't have to talk about it a great, but of course traditional Atars or Itters, the Indian ones, the Arabic ones, they would have been composed entirely of scented materials, but do these ones contain a kind of carrier oil or carrier base?
They do.
Right.
Yes, they do. And that's and then that was in the process we developed with the innovations team at Firmenich to do that. But if you smell you can let your nose be the judge. Even if you try the tuberose, the level of intensity and singularity and purity of that is unrivaled, and the cost of that is beyond in terms of the level of the amount of concentration of natural ingredients for that quantity. So, I encourage people just to try it and see with their own nose what they think. And I think it's a real innovation.
I love these sorts of geeky questions, and this is from a regular viewer. So thank you very much for the question, Ashfaq, who says, how does Firmenich's proprietary infusion process differ in terms of smell from distillation of certain florals on sandalwood, like, for example, the classic Canauge Atar through co-distillate. So basically, what's the difference in the smell, you know, or is there one?
There definitely is, because I think that when you do a co-distillation, it's through essential oils. So as you know, can you remind me of your viewer's name?
Ashfaq.
So Ashfaq, as Ashfaq sounds like he's a very knowledgeable chap. So Ashfaq, as you know, a distillation, when you do a steam distillation, you lose a lot of the volatile elements. And so with Atar Absolutes, we're actually using absolutes infused with sandalwood. So it's actually an infusion process. It's a reimagination of the Atar. It's not a Atar like a Canauge Atar. We're looking at how we could do that in a really modern way next. That's why we call them Atar Absolutes. We use absolutes of the ingredient as opposed to an essential oil. And that's why you get the fidelity of it and you really have to smell it to understand it.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see when you smell the tuberose, for example, how is it to your nose?
Yeah. And another regular viewer, Rachel, because I want to get on to Serge Lutens. Rachel is saying, where is that sandalwood that you mentioned grown, and do you also use any synthetic molecules that mimic sandalwood?
So the sandalwood is absolutely sustainable, ethical, and it's from it's Santalum album, grown in Indonesia, I believe.
Okay, fascinating. And do you use any synthetics as well in the?
For the Atars? No, absolutely not. That's a Santalum album and pure absolutes of either jasmine, tuberose, or rose. And if I can also just tell you about the rose, for your learned audience.
Yes.
With going back to our jasmine CE collaborators in southern India, they work with a community of 5,000 women who pick all the flowers, and we have a project called Project Vetiver. I'm going to open up a few parentheses. By the way, do you know where the word vetiver? Do you know where the word vetiver comes from? Does anybody? Can anybody write in the chat where the word vetiver comes from?
Oh, they're just going to Google it now, even if but I bet somebody does know.
In 10 seconds? Okay, so
he's not
okay. So the word vetiver, I was always taught in my Frenchness when I was learning French that was vetiver, c'est un mot français, or English possibly. It took me going to India to realize the word vetiver comes from the Tamil word, and Pradeep got it. Pradeep Sikar knows it, of course. Pradeep would know that. And so Pradeep, isn't it great? There's so many words in perfumery that come from the Tamil language, actually, or Sanskrit. Yeah. So Pradeep will know that vet means to dig, and ver is root. And so we've got this, and that's why the name of one of the scents is called Vetiver Mousson with 2 T's. Some people think we made a spelling mistake, but it's actually by design to draw attention to that story. But we had this thing called Project Vetiver with these 5,000 women who are the community of flower pickers. And that community we're doing this work they have work to pick the flowers throughout the calendar year. But there were times when their crops were fallow. And so in the bid to try to find more work, working with Jasmine CE, they planted this rose centifolia, an Indian-grown rose centifolia, without knowing what would that centifolia smell like and whether or not it would be good enough for use. Well, not only was it planted and the flowers cultivated and extracted through this joint venture with Firmenich, it's now been added to the perfumery palette. And for the very first time ever, a rose from India is being used in an international perfume. So this a centifolia rose, Indian-grown rose centifolia, is being used by Lilanor for the first time ever, and now will be made available for many perfumers. And that's part of our goal, is to try and get more and more ingredients from India to be made available to more and more perfumers.
No, brilliant. Thank you. Now, with barely 10 minutes left, I would like to take you back, if I may.
Yeah.
To the so were you there? Were you there at the beginning of the creation of the Lutens brand? Because he'd done some work with Shiseido earlier on, hadn't he? So
So so I sort of so I had joined Unilever as I'm Australian. I'd come over to the UK, done some university stuff there, was hired by Unilever as a management trainee, and was by chance deposited into one of their divisions called Quest, which was owned by Unilever at the time, and was due to sort of be working their marketing teams doing soap powder or margarines or something. But I won the lottery, and they said, well, how would you feel about going to Paris for a few years? And I said, well, let me just think about that for about a second. And so I went off to Paris, had this extraordinary several-year mentor, work with Yves de Charisse, the legendary Yves de Charisse. And that's when I would see this extraordinary man come into his limousine every 10 days. And he would come in with this sort of hair over, and this earnest man would come in, and he would come straight into Yves' office, and then, different things would happen. And I certainly was not involved. I would certainly not dare to take any credit for that, but it gave me, there were like 8 of us in the office, so I certainly was there. He would walk by me all the time, but that was the level of proximity. But it gave me a sense of the extraordinary characters that are involved. That scent is a wonderful medium to people and to ideas. And so here was Serge, and I remember him coming one day with, rock from Marrakesh, and that would become the basis of what would be known as Ambre Sultan. And he was such a extraordinary character to look at and observe. And similarly, Thierry Mugler, that was just before Angel had launched. He would come in with Vera Struby, and with also working with Olivier and Yves de Charisse. He really was a creative director on that project in many respects. And seeing that evolution, and seeing, by the way, how when that came out, how hated it was by the perfumery guard, and how it was reviled, and there was a sense of, how dare you launch a perfume like that disregards the sort of the codes of the industry. This was an affront. And so it's just interesting to have been at that moment. Or even Vivienne Westwood coming in and doing a smelling session, and we would go through this process of smelling different ingredients with different designers to try and work out what did they like, what they didn't like, and how, all the things that most people liked, like the floral notes or the spicy notes or the woody notes. She hated all of that stuff, and she only wanted to smell the very naughty things, which I won't say on this very polite channel.
Not always too polite, but the names you mentioned at the beginning. You said Christopher Sheldrake, Maurice Roucel, Pierre Bourdon.
Yeah.
I mean, giants of the industry now. Was that the sort of beginning of the long association that Lutens has had now with Sheldrake? Because I think Christopher Sheldrake,
absolutely,
all of his perfumes,
absolutely it was. It absolutely was. And I would like to just to sort of, I'm sure your audience knows it. Not enough people know we should all be bowing down to Serge Lutens. This whole idea of niche, what if we can still even call it that, is all because of Serge Lutens. What he's done, the idea of bending, the idea of scents that are really about evoking a place, an emotion, a moment, came from, even though yes, there were a couple of brands before that, but I really think that Serge is the genius. He's why a lot of the niche market exists. He's such an extraordinary visionary. And I was in Marrakesh a couple of years ago, and through a long story short, I ended up being able to have a tour of his riad.
What his famous, the famous one that nobody actually lives in. Go on.
It is singularly the most extraordinary architectural experience I have ever had. It is mind-blowing to see his mind manifest in that way. The scope, the scale, the level of detail, the workmanship. It's Japanese in its detail and mania. But if I can just finish on this last story, which was the chap who was taking us around, said, I shouldn't necessarily show you, but I'm going to show you into the inner sanctum, which is where Monsieur Lutens creates all of his perfumes. And of course, I wasn't going to say anything about. And he said, this is his perfume atelier. And it was in this little room. And in it, we walked in, and this is not open, so it was only through a very, very connected person who was able to arrange it. So it's not a tour. It was I was very lucky to have it. And we walked in, and then there was a cabinet, and we opened up the cabinet, and I saw all these little samples in the handwriting of my colleagues from the early 90s, the same samples that I remembered with our little labels. So it brought me back to the very early days of my career, and that was just a couple of years ago. So he's kept all these lovely old samples and little petite marmotte from those times. So that was really a fantastic sort of full circle moment.
I'm going to take one more question from Ashfaq, because this question just tickles me. You probably know the answer to that. Ashfaq is saying, do you by any chance have a stash of Nombre Noir? You know, the old the longest.
If only.
No, okay. No, I did think you would that would be a no. Paul,
sorry, go ahead. No, please.
No. Go on. What were you going to say?
No, but you know, I do love some of the original the original four the Palette Royale collection, the ones that can I'm having a
like Firmenich du Bois and things.
La Firmenich du Bois. La Firmenich du Bois. That's exactly it. I mean, what a masterpiece! What a masterpiece! And then that. I mean, I still love that fragrance, and I love that composition, and that's a great.
Oh, it would. We long for the day when we get like a Lilanor version of Firmenich du Bois, something like that. That would be interesting.
Soon come.
Okay, Paul, I cannot thank you enough. I can't believe where the time has gone. I think we could have easily filled another couple of hours, but maybe when the next project is released, you'd be good enough to come back on, and we can talk some more about it.
May I just ask that we're just a brand new brand, and this opportunity is so important for us. No one really knows about us yet, so we'd love people to sort of follow us on our Instagram at Lilanor Perfumes. Tell us what give us some feedback. We're in this journey together, but your community of people who really care about perfume are the ones that really mean a lot to us. So we are looking forward to a dialogue and excited to have this chance to speak to you and your audience.
Thank you very much. And as you said, in the UK, the perfumes can be tried at Harrods, in the US at Bergdorf's. But thank you very much. I'm sure they will be available in more places. And thank you to all of you for watching. Stay tuned to social media for details of more videos to come. But until then, get to working on the next perfume, because we're not very patient. We want to smell the next perfume.
Okay, noted.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.